Thank you all for coming and signing up for this. It's going to be fun. I'm going to go over some of the basics. I'd like to get a kind of a straw poll, though. I mean, granted, there's quite a few of you here, which is great. I'd like to get a straw poll of who's basically had a little bit of grounding in this kind of thing, and who's really kind of like just getting started at freehand figure drawing. I mean, in essence, I prepare for everybody at all different levels to come in to do this kind of thing. But it's always interesting to know who's where in terms of their journey through the drawing, the whole drawing process. Hi, Chloe. Welcome to the group. So what I'm going to do, here we are. Yeah, fair enough. Well, thanks for that, Spencer. I'll talk just a little bit about the basic mannequin. I don't want to spend too long on it only because we won't get to the fun drama of it, but just to bring up the notion of working with the mannequin figure. This is something that has been around for a long time as a process. And I think the idea behind working with, when I say a mannequin, I don't mean a real wooden mannequin. Oh, hey, Elaine, welcome to the group.
Hello.
Hey there. Hey, Alejandro. Welcome. Hey, Keith. You made it. Come on in. Hey, Melina, thanks for putting your camera on. It's nice to see you. One of the things that was going on, of course, during COVID is we had to do all of this. Yeah, we're going to record. In fact, I think it's auto recording, probably is recording right now, because the workshop group that is overseeing this sets it all up, and it looks to me like I'm seeing the red little square on right now. So yes, absolutely, it is recording. So perfect. Yeah, so basically what I was saying was during COVID, we had to all work with the students as instructors, and the instructors and the students had to work with us, all by remote, of course. And so when we did that, it was somehow a little daunting because a lot of students didn't want to put their cameras on. And so you'd be teaching to basically a wall of icons. And it was like, oh my God. And I figured out why it bugged me so much. Now, I'm not saying any of you have to put yours on today. Today is more about presenting, because I think we've only got 2 hours and there's quite a few of you here. So I think what we're going to do today more than anything else is just present a lot of this stuff, give you a grounding in I think the do's and don'ts and things to keep in mind when you're doing dynamic figures, drawing dynamic figures. And I think that's all we can expect out of a 2-hour setup. So yeah, going back to that, the wall of icons was a little bit daunting. And I guess what bothered me about it was that if I'm dealing with a class of students and I'm saying something and somebody's not getting it, then you can sort of see it. If you see them, you can read their expression and go, oh no, Franklin, I think I better spend a few more minutes with you later on, man, because I don't think you're quite getting this. I think Samantha next to you, she's getting it fine. I can see that she's just nodding her head and saying, yeah, that's cool, I get this. But man, Franklin, you're having a problem. So you get to know that, you get to gauge that. And when it was a wall of icons, you didn't really get to know whether people were getting what you were saying or whether it was all just going right over their heads or like you were speaking in some crazy other alien language or something. So it was kind of cool to be able to see people again coming back off the pandemic protocols. So what we're going to do today is I want to just do a little bit of presenting to start with, as just a couple of the basic principles. Really, really short presenting, and then I want to get on the board here and just have the fun, because this is what this is all about. You can't. I always loved chalkboards. Yeah, we just had a big, beautiful chalkboard at the old. Yeah, hey Nigel. Yeah, so we had lots of chalkboards at the old school. Here we have none. We have whiteboards, and I'm not a wild. Anybody who actually worked on a whiteboard? Big fat squeaky markers on the whiteboard.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did both of them, because in my school we had like the old chalkboards, and then we changed to the whiteboards. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, don't like them. They got no soul. They got no rhythm. They got no soul, man. They're just dead. I mean, they get the job done, I guess, but they're just dead. We're a chalkboard. That's got music. Just the minute you hit it. So we're gonna have some fun on the chalkboard. Going to go through a lot of do's and don'ts as I think, suggestions as to ways to go and things to watch out for in your own drawings as you're working through dynamic figures, and also staging. We'll talk a little bit about staging the figures, simple protocols that you can make use of in terms of using various angles, literally, also just how you crop your images to be able to stage drama. So we'll go through as much of that as we can fit into 2 hours. So let me just start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen with you. I'm just going to share a window. Hang on. Hopefully this will work. Okay, are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Just make it even bigger. All right. So this is what I do. I'm a comic book artist. This is what my stock and trade is doing superhero, over the top, crazy action stuff. Been doing it for a lot of years. So here is like a typical image that you might be dealing with in the comic book. And what goes into that image in the early part of the drawing process, however, is something more akin to this. Let's get on to the next panel. Okay. So here it is, stripped back of all linear detail, facial features. I will admit that I have thrown fingers on the hands. Sometimes you can even just leave them as rough gestural sketches. Now, these are really clean. I did this for clarity's sake, but I've got to tell you, quite honestly, there's no way that you're going to be doing sketches like this with these clean, perfect lines normally. They're going to be rough and tumble. They're going to be like the chalkboard sketches that we're going to be doing. There's certain things that I talk about in terms of building mannequin figures. I like a center line. Center lines are really useful. Also, sometimes a lateral line on the side of the body is useful for plotting things. Chest line, obviously around the waist, you throw in a demarcation. I tend to build a hip construction that's a little bit boxier than the form for the torso. There's reasons for that, and I can go into that a little bit later on. Simple tapered cylinders for arms and legs, and simplified versions of the feet and the hands, and also the mannequin head. Basic shape, directional, sockets built in, center line usually, almost always. Depends on the angle. Obviously, our guy over here is a straight side view. He doesn't have any center lines. But the idea there is to get the camera angled in on the head, get the positioning right, work it with the whole figure, and then add the details later on. If you segment the tasks in this way, it makes the whole thing more doable. If you try to sit down and have the notion of just building this thing fully formed from nothing in a few seconds, forget it. It's very daunting. There may be some really super talented people out there that can do that, but most of us have to work our way through a process like this, something that makes sense, something that segments the tasks into doable portions, and then we build up our images gradually. Oh, what are you doing? I didn't ask for that. These are excerpts from the book that I did, Freehand Figure Drawing. And what this is this is the mannequin figure right here. And I've just segmented it up. Let's just see if we can get a bit closer on it. Yeah, that's oh, hey, easy. I got a sticky cursor here. Pardon me. Bring it down a bit. All right, so you can see how simple these shapes are, but the trick to them is as simple as they are, you still have to be able to draw them and rotate them around in space, to be able to think in 3D about them. And the first task really is to get good at taking the individual parts and rotating them around. That's going to help you immeasurably. All right, let me just go back for a second. There's the whole mannequin figure. Everything kind of smoothed out, but all reassembled. And the reason I call it a glass mannequin is because you have to be able to see through it. There's really practical reasons for that. One of them being if you've got a 3/4 view on somebody, you want to be able to see where the far arm inserts. Parts of the body might be in front of where the actual insert is for the arm, but you need to know where that is. If you build it like it's at least semi-transparent, you're going to find that every time. You're going to be fine. The other thing about it is if you build it, it's a kind of a challenge. If you build it as see-through, then it's going to get you thinking about it as being three-dimensionally more often, more frequently. And the trick, one of the big tricks to any of these drawing skills is the ability to be able to visualize and then get your hand to work in 3D. Make it feel, even though you're working on a 2D platform, like the creatures, the environments, everything you draw is looking three-dimensional. It's the greatest trick you can muster up, and you need to have a good, well-developed three-dimensional sense to be able to pull it off on a regular basis. And practice with things like this, building these kinds of forms that are semi-transparent, that's going to help you to develop those skills to be able to visualize and draw in 3D on a 2D platform. And when I say 2D platform, I mean pencil to paper, but I also mean working on a flat screen. There's that one again. All right. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today. And what I'm talking about really at the beginning is step number one. Yeah, I'm going to wait till I get to the chalkboard. But basically, there's a few little key things to look for and to think about every time you're posing figures. The dynamic ones and even the more quiet poses. And that is, first of all, what they refer to as a natural line of rhythm. Natural line of rhythm in the case of this one is a very gentle S curve that runs through the core of the pose. And when I talk about the core of the pose, I talk about the relationship between the torso and the hips, and often I'll include the head in that as well. So that's what we call the core of any given figure, the core of any mannequin figure, the core of any pose is those three elements. Sometimes I'll just refer to it as the torso and the hips alone, but typically I like to add the head into the mix. And then after that, you work on where the limbs are going. This is the secret of freehand figure drawing. One of them is that most poses start with the core and work outwards. So you want to get the alignment of the torso and the hips in particular sorted out before anything else. Then after that, you can have the arms flow off of that, the legs flow off of that. And yes, sometimes even wait and have the neck and the head flow out of that relationship between those two parts. And we'll do that and demo that over and over again today. Just another one. This is a case of a standing figure where I've simply pushed the pelvis forward a little relative to the shoulders to create a sense of an S curve. The other part that makes it an S and not a simple C curve is the fact that the neck slings forward ever so slightly, and it's pretty subtle here. But that head coming forward slightly relative to the upper body, the torso, and then that change of direction again at the hips allows for the S. And then you allow the arms and legs to flow off of that S curve. And that's about, I mean, this is a case of rotating parts in space, really important for foreshortening. And you're going to want to be able to foreshorten the parts to be able to do whole figures in a variety of poses. And even if you never, ever want to do high or low camera angles, if you simply have a character reaching down to tie up a shoelace, well, you've got to be able to foreshorten the parts or you're in trouble. More hip constructions. Again, these are excerpts directly out of the freehand figure drawing book, but I'll share them with you also briefly just to show you where we're going with this today. And then the simple cylinders of the arms and the legs. And just trying out and practicing all of these different parts from every conceivable angle until you feel like you could do them in your sleep. Yeah, that's the angle of the head, how it mounts on the top of the torso. I think one of the how-to instruction manuals once mentioned the wine glass of the torso. I kind of like that because it was very three-dimensional feeling, but a wine glass is flat on the top, and this is anything but. With the trapezius rising up at the back, you create a very specific angle for the neck. The neck and the head come out of it at that angle. I mean, they're pushed around off of that every now and then, but this is kind of a default standard situation. And so if you can place that, what I call scientifically the neck hole, in the right location, that's going to lead to a successful pose. So that's enough of this. I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to get onto the board now where the fun is. So I'm just going to knock that off and stop presenting. And we're back. And hopefully my camera comes back on. That'd be nice. All right, good. Okay. So I want to make sure I've got a nice position here. I kind of prepped this beforehand. So I think this is good. All right. So there's a bunch of things to talk about and a bunch of things to watch out for. And I mentioned a few things. I'm going to throw a few of them up there, and then we're going to do some demos on them. The first one I like to talk about is and like, oh, who knows about an illustrator by the name of Andrew Loomis? Show of hands. Frederick, I know you do. Spencer, you've seen them? You know their books? Yeah, they're cool. Fun with a pencil, successful drawing, but especially figure drawing for all it's worth. Those are my Bibles when I was first learning myself. And he talks a lot about things like the natural lines of rhythm. Johanna, you had your hand raised. Or was that just to say, yes, I know about Loomis? Okay. Cool. All right. So let's get going. So natural line of rhythm. This is not rocket science. There's an S curve and there's a C curve. That's about it. And sometimes it's a reverse S and sometimes it's a reverse C. But they suggest arching through the body. Oh, okay. Terminology and the way I tend to use it. I talk about a curve, and typically I'll talk about the S curve or the C curve. And when I'm talking about a curve, otherwise, I'll be talking about something like got a red. Okay, so C curve through this body. So when I have somebody arching forward, or possibly when I have a figure arcing back like that, that's what I'm going to talk about curves. So that whenever I'm talking about a curve, I'm just talking about an arching of the spine, curling forward or stretching back. When I talk about a bend, I'm going to talk about bends. And I know these words can be used interchangeably. So that's why I'm going to throw terminology at you right now. And so when I talk about a bend, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about later. When I'm talking bend, I'm going to refer to bend specifically as sideways curving. So if you've got a character that's someone's reaching down for something and they're basically bending sideways. So the idea here will be, that's a bending action. This is a curving action. That's a curving action. When you hear me talk about bends, it's going to be forward or back, or sorry, bends are going to be sideways, side to side, and curves are going to be forward to back. So that's just my terminology, just so we keep on the same page with that. But that comes up. How does it knock this off? And give that a minute to dry. I could not, for the life of me, get erasers, but I think the cloths work better anyway. You have to special order them. I can't believe you can't just walk into a store anymore and get a chalkboard eraser. What's the world coming to? They're up. I'm going to throw some extra parts on them, okay? So I'm not sure what I'm doing with it. I'm just playing it by ear. But what I'm doing here is I'm just adding the deltoids. When I was first teaching, I would save the deltoids till about the 4th or 5th section of the course. And then I realized, then it feels like you've got these weird free-floating cylinders for arms, which made no sense. So I've since revised that, and right away I get the deltoids right in there because of the connector on the shoulder here, and they just make the mannequin model make more sense. If you get them in the earlier, that's better. So I'm just going to connect in. As we're talking about action today, let me just think about broad action on this. So I'm going to pull the arms out from the body, not let them tuck in too tight. And that's going to help. I guess I'll just let this one go. It's going to be too close to do anything meaningful with it anyway. So I would rather just clean the space for now. And we'll just focus on this one action. I'll get back to that arm in a minute. Kind of a wedge block shape for a hand, and then build the inserts for the fingers on the ends. Create a kind of a soft arc typically for those fingers. I like to get the relationship between the thumb, the ball of the thumb, and the rest of the palm in fairly quickly, because to me that's just a gestural maker of the hand pose, and the sooner that's in, the better. And then I'll do something like that and just sort of fill out what I think would be the silhouette for the pose, and then I'll break that down into fingers when I need to. Sometimes you don't need to. We'll let that trail off. So as simple as these forms are, think of them in the round and build through the other side that you can't see. And that will train your brain to think in the way of 3D volumes. It's really a wonderful tool. And I preach that for everything. I mean, I have my students starting structural drawing where they're not working with figures, where they're building basic box forms all over the place. And I insist that they draw those box forms in 3D as well, because, in other words, see through to the far side. They feel like they're transparent. The reason being that it gets the brain trained to think in 3D, to think about the sides that you can't normally see, but you know are there anyway. And it's amazing what a helpful tool that is. I'm going to very deliberately make sure that the head is not lining up with the upper body. This is a dumb little trick in creating dynamic, interesting poses. If you're working on a pose and you're liking it generally, but you find there's stiffness in it that keeps bothering you, there's often good reasons for that. One of them is often the case where you'll have the head too perfectly lined up with the body. And I should just, I guess, hang on. Which one of these was the damp, but not that one? This one. Let me just knock this out for a minute. I was going to that place, but let me just see if I can demo this thing. So, I mean, that's okay. That's having a head perfectly lining up with the torso. But generally, I think it's so much more fun to do something else with it, to turn it another direction. Give that a minute to dry. Let me get this other hand in. I find with hands, you want to build them like I said, a wedge block that tapers in a little bit gently on each side towards the knuckles and then the fingers. But with that being said, you can tap into a lot of basic shapes. And if you are an artist or artistically inclined at least, then you're probably already wired to tune into shapes and to be able to pull them out of your library, your mental library. And I think that's not to be underrated. The ability to knock down a shape. Also, if you can then take those shapes and think of how they would morph from one angle to another angle to another angle, that's also going to be super useful. So you can block in a thing like a hand very quickly without even thinking too much about it in terms of a structure, just by tapping into a shape. There's nothing about that that's cheating. There's nothing about that that's wrong. This is a way to get where you need to go. It's a means to an end. Don't like it, then redo it. Oh, the head. I was having this character turning this way. So in this case, we have some foreshortening in the upper body. And we have followed through here by allowing the head to drop down low on the body. In other words, I'm not worried about having the chin up here somewhere because we know that the whole body's hunkered down. And as it comes down, then obviously the head's going to drop down in front as well to some degree. You don't want to push it too far, but you want those elements to overlap each other. It's going to allude to the fact that the character's leaning forward and leaning into whatever the action is. This is an important thing to keep watch on in your own drawings. One thing about the cloth, I always found the brushes you couldn't really fine tune very well, but the cloth, you can make a little tip out of it and you can actually do some pretty good fine tuning. My, what big hands you got. He's still got big hands. I like making big hands by default. All right, so let me just move somewhere else with this thing. Things that you do, the curve here, exaggerate it a little bit. Imagine it being like a cylinder. If you had a cylinder and you were looking at it at eye level, let's just say your rim's like this, okay? And then you're looking at it more from above. The more above it is, the more you're going to create a really strong curve to that cylinder. So it's great to think about that. But what if you isolated a piece of it? Say that piece there versus the piece, say here. What you're finding is that that curve, that piece of curve is more exaggerated down here. Well, that's what happens when you look at any form from high or low angles. You exaggerate whatever the shape of it is. So a chest line, for instance, can become more curved. And when you do that, it's going to make a bigger, better sense of the perspective that's going on in the piece. Likewise, if we went back to what we were doing before, and I might as well just go something like that. Anybody have a sense of what that torso is doing? Like, what is the position of that torso?
It's stretching, right? It's leaning, it's curving
Way back?
like no, to the side, I think.
Let me just help us.
Oh no, it is curving back. Yeah, it's going backwards. Yeah.
One of the things that helps, because in this case, I have a straight on shot. The core of the body is bang on to the camera, which means I don't have a lot of information about that curve. I mean, if I was doing it from the side, it'd be easy. I'd have big sweeping curve running down it. But I got none of that happening here. However, you can still tell what's going on because you get down to the waist and you have a curve like that. Up here at the chest, you got a curve like that. The fact that the curves are moving in the opposite direction the way they are is inferring that. That's the power of those cross contour lines on the form. So you want to be vigilant in how you play with cross contour lines because they can say a lot to the viewer as to what the exact angle and alignment of an individual part is. And alignment becomes really important when we're doing all of these crazy action figures. Another thing is the inserts for the arms tend to drop a little bit relative to where they normally would be. So where you have a shoulder up here somewhere, now you can forget that action. You're looking steeply up the upper body and the upper torso area from a low angle, the inserts for the arms just drop lower. So it's a crazy little thing to keep in mind, but it's amazingly useful. Oops, ran out of chalkboard again. They never seem to be big enough. Even when they're massive, they never seem to be big enough. You always run out. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, the idea being that you get the sense of the stretching action going on because of the cross contour lines, and of course your relationship between the parts. Just as with this one, you're getting it with the overlapping of the parts and the fact that the cross contours are moving the other direction. So a thing to watch out for is how you manage those in your own drawings. That's one consideration, cross contour lines. Let's throw it down. So I think you want to ask yourself what you need to do. Okay, I'm just going to let this go. You guys have seen it already. I want as much space as I can get on this chalkboard and not fixed to the wall, by the way. All right, so it's going to dry for a moment. So you want to talk about that. There's other things to consider. Tip line of balance. And that's another one that Loomis came up with and uses a lot in his book. Tip lines of balance simply means you're going to take the core of the body and you're going to tip it, maybe forward, maybe back, maybe listing to one side or the other side, or maybe a combination of side and back or side and forward. So the idea being is that you're going to be acutely aware of the alignment of not only the parts relative to each other, but how they might be tipping one way or the other. And that is particularly useful in big crazy action, because in big crazy action is way more dynamic if you make use of tips to create the sense of the figure in motion. I'm going to do a little of both, just for fun here. All right, so I'm building a mannequin torso and hips at the moment. And I'm doing a couple of things. I'm cheating because I'm doing two things at once. I'm being bad. All right, I get it. I'm throwing a big tip in. And when I say tip, what I mean is this. Well, these mannequins start looking like Spider-Man. I don't know why.
It's the old habits.
That's a tip. That's a tip line of balance. A very strong tip line of balance forward. You can take advantage of tips like this to create a wonderful sense of motion, in this case, forward motion. But what other trick did I just pull out? I said I was being bad because I was stacking two tricks on one. The first trick, if you want to call it that, was a tip line of balance forward. Very strong one. But I'm doing something else with this pose to add dynamics to it. Something that I haven't mentioned yet. Anybody got any ideas? Nothing?
I mean, other than the line of action, we have
One other little thing I've been doing, I haven't even mentioned it, so I'm being coy about it, but really I should, because it's important. It's worth mentioning. Let's knock this off so that we can get some room to do the next thing. Okay, that can go too. You guys know what the school is. MTM College. All right. I'm gonna push that up even more. Kind of like it.
oh no, it's screwed up.
What am I doing here? I'm lowering the center of gravity. The center of gravity is a thing that you should be thinking about. I'm so grateful I took animation for a few years because it was in animation that they talk about a lot of these very serious considerations that as comic book artists we kind of think about but don't necessarily take that much to heart. Things like center of gravity, being aware of the center of gravity around a character, whether that is moved forward or backward or is it directly under the body. Basically a low center of gravity, meaning a character is in a crouch or a low position. So in this case, I could have oh my, that was head's too small. Size it up. One of the famous artists in comics made the crack one time in an interview. I don't get paid to erase. God bless him. But frankly, I'm really grateful for erasers. It's part of the process, just as much as the pencil or the crayon is part of the process. The eraser is really helpful. So, crazy tip line of balance forward. Got that figured out, right? But the other little thing I did here, which is worthy of note, we were talking, remember, we talked about tip lines of balance, yes, but also We talked about before that, the whole notion of a essential gestural curve running through a figure. So what do you think? Here. Well, I think with the head, it still looks like a bit of an S curve, even if it has a strong tip. Sort of feel like, and because the back arches, you're getting that, which is taking that S curve and putting it pretty strongly on a horizontal axis instead of a vertical one. Nothing wrong with that. And it all works. But there's one other thing, the thing that I haven't mentioned yet, that is also a part of this pose, besides those two things. Now, I said sometimes it's good to throw a lateral line on a figure, not just a, sort this thing out, make it a little bit clearer. Not just a center line through the middle of the body, but particularly when you start getting into a situation where you have a side view or three-quarter side view, to be able to map that three-quarter side view with a lateral line. So I'm going to do this. And then as if that's just going to run down the leg like so. What that's helping me to see is that not only does this character have a strong, where's that red gone again? Pardon my back. I don't know how to avoid this. Tip line of balance. This one. I mean, that's supposed to be green, but it probably just looks like yellow to you guys. I get a greener green. This was the line of, oh man, how to RHYTHM, right? Isn't that rhythm? I've got rhythm. All right. Line of rhythm. But this lateral line here is suggesting one other thing through this figure, and that is twisting action. Now, you can't always justify a twist through a figure, but as you are drawing from your imagination and you're working out figures and you're doing these core poses with the mannequin, working the volumes and so on, think about ramping it up by using things like twists, tip lines of balance, and working the natural lines of rhythm to aid and abet you in building strong poses. And so things like that you should think about all the time. The other thing that's worth considering, and in this case it's not so strong a thing, but it might still be worth mentioning, is this. Yeah, they're so slightly off each other, it's not a big deal here, but I'm going to do more of these where we play more with that. And that is the relationship between the shoulders and the hips. In terms of alignment, for you to simply keep track of that, to make use of it and deliberately exaggerate at times, that relationship between the shoulders and the hips is going to help to ramp up what you do with your poses. Let's get rid of this guy and play around more with that. I'll leave these up. With big old question marks next to them. Because I think they're things that you should basically constantly be thinking about and playing with. Sorry about that, I just lost my chalk. It does tend to roll. Tip line of balance, line of rhythm. And in this case, you could just ask yourself, S, curve, and to what degree? How much? These things you just keep in your head. I mean, here it'll be forward or backward. Let's just have some fun. All right, this is going to be building a core. It includes a head right off the bat, and I'm going to figure out what to do with it. I have no strong feeling of what I'm going to do with the action yet, but I know it's got a few things going for it. It's got a strong tip line of balance back. It's got a twist. You can see the center line. You don't even need that lateral line across the side now. There's enough of the front showing all around that you can get a sense of that. So you got the tip line of balance. You've got the twisting action running through the figure. I've deliberately kept the head at a little different alignment. I've tucked it down. And because I've tucked it in and forward the way it is, you can already see, and I could actually just use that tip line of balance. You can double for the other one. You can see that there's an S curve running through the. Now, all of those things benefit you when you think about them deliberately and work them into your poses. Let's see where we might go with this figure. I've got the hips at a different alignment from the shoulders. Let's have a look at that for a minute. In this case, it's not subtle. In this case, the change up between the hips and the shoulders is quite strong. And that also leads to the drama and interest in the pose. So I can come up right there. More foreshortening. Let me just see. Mess around with it. Let's just get a sort of a mock-up of where I want those hands to be. And no, I don't like that lower one at all. I'm just going to take that away. Try again. This is more fun. Typically what I like to do, and this is my conceit, this is not anything that I would suggest to you, except try it. If it works for you, that's great. But rather than working progressively, joint by joint by joint, down an arm or down a leg, I often like to figure out where I want to place either the hand or the foot, and then find my way back to the point at which it comes off the body. So in a case like this, I'm gonna take some of those bits away so you can see what I'm doing. don't worry about finishing this part up, just get a silhouette of it working for now. It's the whole thing that I like to talk about how the hand comes off the wrist. And the wonderful little, say, ½ inch of space between the wrist bone and when the palm actually flares out, and how you could exploit that in your own drawings to good effect, because it will give a nice fluid feel to your arms. And if you don't use it, it will stiffen up the arms. So it's a funny little thing. It's like you've got literally like a ½ inch, typically, after the wrist bone. And the classic artists have been exploiting it for forever. So why not you two? I guess you might say I have a choice as to which leg. I want to raise one leg. I want to keep one down. And you may think you have a choice, but you actually don't have a lot of choice here. Any idea why? Rodrigo.
Because of the, let's say, counterbalance, like it. I guess in a way, in my lame terms, in a way, it looks cooler if you like. How do you say this? Like, if it's not too symmetrical, it looks better. Like, because
yeah, absolutely. But I could, in other words, if you're looking at it and going, well, gee, I mean, I just want to have one up and one down. I get that. That would look cool to do one up and one down. But then maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, it doesn't matter. I can make the right leg the one that's raised, and the other one down, or I can do it the other way.
Maybe
wrong.
The center of gravity also, like, and the flow of movement. No,
it's the flow, and it has to do with which hip is raised. Because the next thing to consider is that a strong leading action of an arm or a leg affects what's going on with the alignment of the core of the body. It's action and reaction. So the body and its alignment has to react to what you're doing with the arms and legs. And in a sense, we are reverse engineering through this, because we started with the core of the pose. Now we have to infer what the legs would be doing based on what we've already done with the alignment of this pose. And in this case, that's up, that's down. So I'm thinking that leg's gotta be the one that's up, because that's the only reason why that twist would exist in the first place. So you've got to follow through with what you've already established in your relationship between the torso and the hips. And if you don't, if you take it the wrong way, it's going to look awkward. Might still look cool. You might get all the other things working right. There might be nice 3D volumes to it. You get the perspectives looking good. You'll get all these other things right, so it'll look okay. But the fact that you did the legs the wrong way around, you're going to be looking at it afterwards and going, God, there's something just bugging me. It's just gnawing at my brain about this pose. What the heck's wrong with it? That's what it'll be.
Dave, in this case, it's going to be the right leg, right? I mean,
in this case, the right leg is the up. Yeah, the one that's up. Yeah. Gotta be. All right. So that thing I talked about, I'm doing it again. Oops, I'm doing it again. Throwing a foot in where I want it, and I'm finding my way back to the knee. Okay, I'm applying a little bit of anatomy as I go, and this is totally all right to do. As you're sort of getting the flow of it and you're feeling good, you've been learning your anatomy, you've been practicing the shapes, you've been practicing the muscles, why not incorporate a little bit of that gently, at least, into the outer contour lines of the simple cylinder forms as you go? Nothing wrong with doing that at all. Do it as you feel comfortable doing it. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, stick to simple cylinders to start with. But later, of course, you can do whatever amount you feel like. It's like they talk about when you're learning how to drive at the speed you're comfortable driving at. Well, in this case, put the amount of anatomical form into your early mannequin that you feel comfortable putting in. You don't feel comfortable doing any, don't do it. All right, so that's that. Now I got to draw through this thing again, see where my hips had gone, because I need to get that of the leg, and I need to find the far insert for that leg, one that makes sense. That's about where I think the knee should be, right there. Open it down a bit. Take that line away now. There I go, right off it again. Great. Kind of wondering, and this is fine tuning time. I'm just going to take a moment because I want to get on to other poses, but it's fine tuning time because I'm looking at it and I'm liking it in general, but I'm thinking that hand, oh man, I just feel like when I see the rest of it, the arms and the rest of the pose, I just feel like I'd like that hand to be twisted a bit more. The twist feels like it'd be right. Gotta let that dry for a second. Even if it's not a fist, even if it's an open hand, I feel like I'd like to just twist that arm around. It just feels right for the pose. And these are little things that are amazing. Again, I talk to my regular students here at the school. I'll say to them, if you've got a pose where you feel it's everything's just about clicking, check on little things. Check on the little things like the alignment of say wrist and a hand. Would it be if I twisted a bit more? Is that going to increase the gestural flow in the figure and make the whole thing click together? Or what about that leg? Maybe I can need to spread it out a bit more. And if I just pivot that foot a little bit more, oh, that looks so much better. These are little things you should watch for in your own drawings. When you're getting close to being finished and you're reasonably happy, but there's things gnawing at you, check the little nuances around a position of a hand or a foot or just tilting a head a little bit more. There's a certain magic that happens when you get a pose to click together, when everything just makes sense and feels very natural. It's suddenly the sum of the parts are much more than, or what's the term? It's the value is more than the sum of the parts. It just feels that way. All of a sudden, you've hit that magic moment. So look for it. Be prepared to know it exists. It's real. It's out there. And be prepared to be playful with making tweaks to your own poses to see if you can find that perfect position of all the parts where the harmony is just right. Because the craziest little things can make a huge difference sometimes. The other thing to do is to watch out for silhouettes. Now, that was another thing I got from animation, because in animation, they really harped, at least in the courses that I took, on the importance of a strong silhouette. And when you're doing comic book art, sometimes with all the crazy foreshortening, it's hard to maintain those strong silhouettes. But whenever you can, look for negative spaces, look for the gaps, make the thing read if it was seen as a silhouette. Well, you can't always do it, that's okay. But whenever you can, make full use of that. All right, let's get this one off the board and get working on something else. All right, give that a moment. Just write that twist thing down we're talking about. Just another thing to kind of put on your short list to ask yourself when you're working through any given pose. Thinking what I'd like to do next. So what I'm doing here is got a strong sideways bend, but he's arched back. So there's just a little bit of foreshortening through the upper body here. Also, you could argue a very slight twist through the core because the character is sort of twisting around with the ball. Yeah, I kind of like the, I was going to pull the other leg in here and have the character deliberately off balance, but I think that's maybe going too far at the moment. So I kind of like to go with the kind of legs akimbo shaping to them. So I'm going to pull in a little bit at the knee and then pull out. Oh, guess what? Arms and legs, particularly when they're outstretched and not in bending situations. This is really cool. They have their own innate S curves to them. Yep. You don't just think about the S curve through the core of the body. You also think about individual arms and legs as having S curves too. And that can work really well. So you have a thing like this. It has a beautiful flowing line through it. So those flowing lines will add a beautiful sense of fluidity to your poses if you think of them with the individual limbs and not just the core. For gestures and getting a lot of beautiful gestural life in your poses, there's a guy I recommend you have a look at. Do any of you know about an artist by the name of Gil Kane? Okay, you look up Gil Kane. Gilkane. The cool thing about Gil Kane is that he did classic thumbnail roughs for so much of the artwork that he produced for Marvel and DC Comics over the years. And somebody out there is constantly selling his roughs. Rapunzel. I'm not sure about that. I remember Green Lantern. Is that anything like Rapunzel? Yeah, he's been gone a few years, but check him out. Nah, that Glenn Keane, yeah, yeah. Check out Gil Kane as well. Glenn Keane would be great. But Gil's work is exaggerated, and you particularly in his roughs, there's a beautiful kind of flow. All this flow I'm talking about right now, you'll see that a lot in his rough pencil artwork. Whether you're a huge fan of his finished work or not, there's a lot to be learned from someone like him and how he approaches the gestural figure. Okay, I'm deliberately throwing this thumb on top of the side of the character's cheek. I could have done a dozen other hand positions that would have kept it clear of the face, but I'm doing it very deliberately. And why? It's part and parcel of the notion that you are trying to create three-dimensional depth. You are illusionists, just like a magician. You are an illusionist, and what you're trying to do is create the illusion of three-dimensional depth on the two-dimensional platform. And every trick in the book that you can pull out is worth using. And all of them on top of each other are worth using to create that illusion. You got to convince your audience for sure. You also have to convince yourself of your own ability to do this in 3D. Now, overlapping elements, one on top of the other, is one really, really good way of creating three-dimensional depth. It works with technical perspective. It works with all the other tricks in concert to create depth. So overlapping is a good thing, provided you're not creating awkward tangents or congruencies, as they're sometimes called, where things line up too neatly with each other and might confuse the reader. In a case like this, a thumb coming up and over the face is not going to confuse anybody. So it's fair game. It's a good trick. I'm going to pull that knee up even higher. Bear with me for a minute. I'm just going to sort this figure out in the background. Lower down. Just trying to get the inserts bright. I'm trying not to draw through this character too much. Yeah, that would be right off the ground, and that needs to be higher. Just going to take all that and pull it up a little bit higher. I talked about the center line before and the spine line if it's the back. And I talked about cross lines, cross contour lines at the chest and at the waist. Another one that I find is really quite interesting and useful for some reason is a center line on the leg. Don't find it as useful on arms, but it's amazing how useful it can be on a leg. So mapping where you want the visual center to be here and keeping track of it can sometimes be very useful. And then at the end, it's a construction line. You're going to knock it off. You're going to get rid of it. But up to a certain point in time, it certainly has its uses. So the knee is actually about here. So to refine and build this mannequin form a little bit better. I deliberately didn't do a fighting scene in this case because I didn't want it to be that kind of a big conflict scene. However, the principle at work here is one of those psychological principles, because I want to talk not just about drawing figures in action today, but also about some staging tricks of the. Can you see it yet? Can you guess at what I'm getting at? Anybody? I drew two individual figures, but if you squint at it a little bit, you can also see it's something else. Nobody got any ideas yet? Seriously, I did that bad a job on it. Okay.
Basically, you did a. Oh, sure.
Yeah, X-Men. Why not?
It can. They can
Classic
complement
concert
it.
formation. All right, let's mess around with some other stuff. How are we doing for time? I haven't checked the time in quite a while. Doing all right. Oh yeah, we're good. Pardon me, I have to have a drink, sip. So when you're dealing with the dynamic action, you generally want to make good use of all these. Push it to the max, you might say, in a lot of cases. And invariably, that's going to involve foreshortening. And so you have to think about that. And you have to practice it and get good at it. And that's taking the parts and being able to rotate the parts into any and often extreme camera angles that involve a lot of foreshortening. And shortening is just shortening. And the main thing to watch out for with that, and especially when it comes to limbs, is to be careful not to narrow the forms at the same time. You're not foreskinnying a leg, you're foreshortening a leg. And there's a difference. You don't want to lose the sense of the mass of a leg if it's receding, say, off into the background. So we're going to play with some foreshortening here. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to start to modify this. I have a notion in my head about leading with that arm, but if I'm leading with that arm, I have to take my own words in mind. Remember what I said earlier about a strong leading action? Forcing, imposing changes of alignment on the body. So if I'm going to have a big, strong, stretching arm, it had better adjust what's going on with the shoulders and create a whole arc through the figure. Otherwise, it's going to look like those old Clutch Cargo cartoons. Nobody knows Clutch Cargo anymore. They used to do these animations where they were on the cheap, where they would have bodies on one level and arms and legs on another. And they would simply have whatever the body was, the body number 116, boom, stick it on there. Throw these legs on it and just have them look like they're running. Only, of course, the body wasn't adjusting or moving at all. It was as stiff as a board. But that passed for animation at that time. We can do better than that. Trust me, we can. So I'm building a neck hole over here and making it a fairly narrow ellipse because I want to create the sense of perspective. I'm allowing this, which would have been a narrower ellipse for the arm insert, I'm allowing it to fatten out as if I'm turning right towards the audience. So my arm insert, my arm hole, if you want to call it that, is quite circular at this point. And that changing of the shape as much as anything else is inferring the bending that's going through this body. Hold the deltoid around here. So one of those crazy typical fist shots coming off a very foreshortened arm, connecting into the arm insert point there. If this is going to look like anything, it's going to look like something because I prepped for the arm position that I knew I was going to be doing. By the way, as with the other pose, I feel compelled. I don't have a choice. As much as I'd like to have a choice, I don't have a choice in what I do with the legs. This has already been dictated, whether you know it or not, whether you realize it or not, it's already been dictated by the alignment of the core of this pose. I have no choices in the matter. Which leg is coming forward? Which leg is going back? What do you think? Based on what you're seeing here. two things are dictating it. One is the configuration of the pose itself that is forcing a certain kind of flow through those arms and legs, and particularly now through those legs. As we have established the arm positions, we now have to look towards doing the right thing with the legs. When you're running, there's a rule of thumb with both a standard walk and a run. And particularly, again, they hammer this into your brain if you go and take animation programs. They talk about the run cycle and the walk cycle. And one of the things they talk about is the opposing action of the arms and the legs. And although this is not a run, it actually works just as well. It's a consideration that you have to take seriously. So this arm is forward. This arm is not as forward. You've got this whole angle thing going on through the shoulders versus the hips. It's basically dictating the fact that this has to come forward. That has to go back. It just wouldn't make sense otherwise. And in many cases, you'll either have a strong leading action that will force a change on the core of the body, or vice versa. You'll have an alignment of the torso versus the hips that will force a particular configuration to the legs and to the arms. They all have to work in concert with each other. Oh, I think I like that drop down now that I see it. I think I want that down like this.
Sorry.
Oh, there's a thing I talk about, and this has to do with what I was mentioning earlier, very briefly, about the fact that you have S curves and S curves in both arms and legs, depending upon the position that you're dealing with. But very often, if we're talking about not outstretched necessarily, but a straight arm or a straight leg. And in this case, you can really see it in a leg position like this. If you were building this as a mannequin figure with a cylinder base to it, you would take the tapered cylinder of the thigh, and rather than having the tapered cylinder of the shin or the lower leg directly underneath it, you displace it slightly and then connect the knee into it. And that very slight displacement, what I call the setback at the knee, that's what gives it its S curve, its gestural flow. This is when I want to just be able to take the board and turn it at a more comfortable angle. Alas, I can't do that with a chalkboard. And you notice he's headless. And how often I find myself doing this, because all of those other things seem to be more important to sort out first. And once you have the whole figure worked out and you see exactly what you've ended up doing and any kind of final tweaks and changes to the alignment of the upper body versus the hips, what you're doing with the arms and legs, then finally you feel, okay, I think this thing is now firmed up enough that I can put that head on. So whereas your normal notion might be to start with the head and work out from it, actually you get better results in many cases, and particularly with this kind of crazy dynamic pose, to wait on that a little while. Not necessarily to the end of the process, but often it might be. It certainly works best for me in many cases to wait on it. So now I can figure out where I want that head. Got a neck hole here, shoulder up like this. I have a much stronger feeling now of what kind of alignment the head might take, because I've seen so much of the rest of it visualized on the page. Whereas I could have put the head in earlier, but I can almost guarantee I would have been redrawing it. Maybe even 2 or 3 times before I got it right. But to wait till the end of the process, it seems to make it a very much easier task to position a head. I think of this as being probably a pretty good moment for me to ask if there's any questions at this point, but also to put it open to you guys for suggestions as to poses that you might have been struggling with that you would like some help with, because I'm happy to basically shape what I'm doing from here on in to your suggestions.
I got a couple of them.
Yep, hang on. Let me make some space. I think that's been on the board long enough. Oops. Pardon my back again. Go ahead, Rodrigo.
How about some high angle shots, like where you looking from up, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, because
So
I
looking
still
down, steeping up.
yeah.
All right. Let me see what I can come up with. So that means some really intense crunching of the form.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's have some fun with that. Sometimes, and when I'm at a Comic-Con and I'm just sitting around, goofing around, coming up with little sketch ideas in my head, because sometimes people will make requests and they don't really care what you give them pose-wise, so you have total freedom in that respect. And I'll often just kind of goof around with ideas. You know, there's times when I'll just kind of mess around and I won't really know what I'm aiming for, but I'll just simply sort of scribble around with a pencil and see where it takes me. Other times I'll get a pretty good notion of an action. A sitting pose. Yeah, let's do a sitting pose. Sounds good. So I'll do a sitting pose with the next pose, but the one I'm going to do right now, I'm thinking, okay, high angle, looking down on a character. I want it to be fun. I want it to be interesting. One of the biggest problems with high and low angles that certainly I've struggled with, and frankly, I feel like other artists have struggled with as well, is the fact that figures often tend to stiffen up. All the things that you're getting right in terms of fluid action when you're dealing with an eye level shot, you seem to sort of forget about. They go on a shelf somewhere because you're so focused on getting all the parts foreshortened the right amount to make the thing look like it's in perspective properly. And so the trick to that is to understand that that happens, that that's a thing, and to actually fight against it as much as you can. Look for every way and every reason to put some gestural, lovely gestural fluid nuances into the pose, even though it has that strong action. So I'm going to start this one off with the notion of a twist. I'm thinking of a twisting action. Maybe somebody who's just heard something behind them and they're turning around. Maybe they're skulking in some place and they really don't want to be seen. And so they're kind of keeping a low center of gravity and turning around. They're looking to see what's going on. Let's try it.
Dave, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Let me just have a look. Yep. Alexandra, with that particular thing, that's where working those cylinders comes in handy. So what I recommend to my students is it's kind of like doing scales in music. I kind of really think of it being like learning your lines for a play. It's very repetitive. You have to do it. But my feeling is if you do simple rotations of the individual elements of the form to the point where you get really comfortable with that, then that is going to solve the problem for you. It's going to take you to where you need to go. So it's like, never mind trying to do a whole figure for a while. Worry about just trying the rotations. In my book, I had a bunch of them. You saw that thing flip by, but just try cylinders. Build a cylinder. Yep. And then just rotate the cylinder in space and just try all the different angles. And don't worry about getting everyone perfect to start with. Just play with it. Exercise it. You're going to get good at it as you go. And then some of those concerns about, oh, gee, what happens to the leg in proportion in that situation? It's going to solve itself because you've done the reps, you might say, beforehand. So my recommendation is there's no golden measure that's going to solve that problem for you. But if you learn to think volumetrically and practice it and try those rotations on all the parts of the forms, it's going to take you where you need to go. And it will just be some repetitive practice that will get you there. All right, because I'm coming up with a strong twisting action in this figure, I want to include the head very quickly. Unlike the other one, the last one, where I wasn't so worried and I left the head till the bitter end, I feel like I'm doing a progressive twist. So I need to get that down on paper very quickly and have a look at it. I'm foreshortening the parts. So I'm taking the standard torso and the standard hips and I'm scrunching them a little bit. And again, I'm being very aware of the fact that when you do this, it's all about shortening. And I know that there's always an inclination to just to automatically narrow the form when you're shortening it. But I know well enough, and I have enough experience with this stuff over the years to know not to do that, to make sure that I keep the breadth of the form the same, even if I'm shortening the length of it. I'm just going to push this back and foreshorten it a bit more.
That's the part where I struggle a lot.
To get just the maintain the mass. What I'm doing is I'm just pushing this back a little. I'm keeping this one fairly subtle. But I do want the sense of the character being a little bit of a crouch. I'm not going crazy with it. I'm not, I mean, you could literally crouch a character so much in a situation like this that you would actually be seeing their back from the front. Isn't that crazy? But from this angle, yeah, I could show this character's back from the front. And maybe just because I said that, I'll have to do a more extreme version of it just to prove it to you. But for now, I'm trying to keep it reasonable. So I'm just pushing the hips back a little bit relative to the positioning of the shoulders. I want to increase the twist through the core a bit more. And drop that shoulder a bit on the far side. Some overlapping. A lot of overlap on the head. That is the brow way down here, strong curve to it. Very delicate around the jawline. A lot of emphasis on the forehead and the top of the skull. I want to create that sense of looking down on the head as part and parcel of the whole thing. Now, because I'm doing this progressive action, I feel like basically pulling that leg forward a little bit and the other one back. That would seem to be in keeping with the twisting of the hips versus the torso. Trying to make a silhouette here that makes sense. Again, even when I'm angling a leg away, as opposed to towards the camera, I still very often like to place the end of it. In this case, it's the foot we're talking about, and get it placed where I want it. Something I have not talked about on this one, but could very well talk about, is this.
The grids.
Not do that, yes. To put a basic grid down.
I was gonna mention it's
And
very
you'll see-
fascinating how you basically did the whole thing without grids because you're in that level, you know.
I'm thinking the grid, even if I'm not drawing it, and that's not fair to you guys.
Yeah.
So I need to talk about that grid. So if you know basic perspective, if you can actually work a little bit of grid work from horizon line vanishing points and just throw them out there. And even if you can't or don't actually go and find the physical points and do it, if you just fan the lines as if you were going back to points, you can create a kind of a very quick grid on the page, and that grid will help you to see the angle of the floor. And if you can see the angle of the floor, then it makes your job of placing the feet on that floor a whole lot easier. So weird. Yeah. Anyway, oh, there it is. Yeah, so the grid line here. That would you see more like that. So you're imagining them going up to these points, this one closer, that one further away. And I'm just kind of fanning lines. And in this case, that one probably should have been a little longer, that could have been shorter. So they're compressing in space as they go. They create that sense of the depth. Got to figure out which angle I'm dealing with. So it's nice, and even for me, who's been at this for a while, I like to revert back to the simple cylinders sometimes. When I'm sorting out a nuance of arm position like this, for instance, I'm looking at this arm. In a sense, that forearm could go either way. I could either be having it trail off away from the viewer, or I could have it slightly towards the viewer as it's bending at the wrist. And as we're just on the cusp of doing one or the other, I feel I want to go back to the cylinder and double check. It's going to help me to firm up in my own mind what I want to do. And that's going to help in turn in terms of drawing a hand on the end of that wrist. Because now I'll have a better, firmer notion in my head as to what angle I'm dealing with. So building these as elliptical forms, sorting that out, giving it a kind of volumetric feel, it's all really, really useful, not just for somebody viewing what you're doing, but also for you in terms of visualizing it and finding your way to where you need to be. Oh, very foreshortened thumb here. I think. Pardon my back again. Getting over in that corner. All right, so just trying to build some fingers off of this that makes sense. And I'll often build the so it's the nightcrawler syndrome, where I'll literally put the two middle fingers in as a kind of gestural form, and then I'll subdivide them at the end. And often I'll do one finger, the first finger and the baby finger, and then find my way to the fingers in between. Seems to work very well to do it that way. Oh, that precious negative space right there. Of course, if the character is wearing any kind of drapery, it'll probably completely obliterate that space. But in the raw pose, I can find a little bit.
Huh. I actually didn't screw up this time.
You didn't? All right. Sort of feel gesturally, and although it may be wrong to do it, and I'm not sure that it is, because I want to talk about something for a minute. But I want to take that away, and I'm going to rework it, and I'm actually going to make it a little longer, even though we're talking about foreshortening. That particular joint, that particular part of the leg, I feel like it's going to be more effective if I actually make it longer.
From the knee down, right?
Yeah. And it's a matter basically of alluding to how you're bending that leg. Because if you're doing a kind of a knees in and the shins out, then actually you wouldn't have that much foreshortening on that portion of the leg. Although you would have foreshortening a lot on the other leg, and you'd have some sort of foreshortening on the thigh for sure. The reason for this is that you have to think about the fact that, let's just say you have a normal stance, never mind this crouching business. But you've got a character, oh, they're sort of doing one of those at the ready stances and the legs are spread. And you got a camera, and the angle of the camera is this, looking down. Well, maybe flip up here. So if that's the angle of the camera, and that's the angle of the leg, they're pretty close to each other. And because of that, there's not a lot of foreshortening going on, because it's not a matter of just generally looking down on something. It's what part, what each of the individual parts is doing in its alignment to the camera, to the viewer. And in this case, that leg's not angling away by much, just a little bit. Whereas, oh my God, you get over to this one. Here's your camera angle. There's the leg. Holy cow. That's like direct opposites. And because of that, there's extreme foreshortening going on. So even if this guy wasn't crouching in any way, then your leg is still going to be doing something like this. So short and almost normal length. Because it's that angle that's all important. It dictates the shortness or foreshortened degree to any individual part in a given pose. Now, I did promise that seated pose, and I will go there, but I remember I also mentioned to you something about a more extreme version of this one and where you might go with it. And I think this speaks to the idea of broader actions. I deliberately made this one gentle. What if we took that pose and we pushed it about as far as we felt we could reasonably push it? What would it look like then? We tend, most of us, and I suspect many of you will find truth in this. I think most of us tend to be conservative in our poses, and that if we need to correct, we need to correct in terms of pushing them further. The things that we're doing right, that's great, but very often we need to just take them and push them double or triple what we're doing with them to take it to a really, really satisfying place. So we need to just break through that conservatism. Let's do this pose again.
So how's spring going on for you guys?
Spring, what's that? It was
Do
snowing a
you
while
still,
ago.
yeah?
Yeah, I was looking at the snow coming down. It's okay now, but the snow was coming
Oh,
down for a while. Oh yeah, that's our spring. It will suddenly be summer. One day we'll have our parkas on, and the next day it'll be t-shirts and shorts.
nice.
Oh yeah, probably in a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's cool. Maybe I'll visit in the summer sometime, you know?
Sounds good.
Okay, now that's really extreme. Um,
I have a spring jacket. I usually get it out about 4 times a year. It's good for about 2 days in the spring and about 2 days in the fall.
but I mean, it's warmer, right, than when I was there.
Um, yeah, it is. Today's actually pretty good. I mean, granted, we had a bit of snow, but it's okay. It's getting there. It's not the deep freeze, numb the nostrils stuff. That's not happening right now.
Like it,
Do you like the cold?
I do. Because I'm so used to warm places, so it was like a new experience for me. And here,
Yeah, a friend of mine-
I hate spring here because it's very dry. Like here in Puebla, it's very dry. So right
yeah.
now you have like all of the grass is yellow, and we have like dust everywhere. But we also have flowers,
Ooh,
so it's this contradiction of dryness and flowers. So
okay.
it's weird.
Yeah, that's a drag. I mean, if there's anything that I miss the most, I'm okay with the cold. I'm okay with all that. I miss the greenery the
Yeah,
most. It's having to deal
yeah,
with all those months of just white and brown and gray, and that's about it.
yeah,
Um, I'm dying to see some green. I
yeah. I
think my
get
dad
you.
too. My dad liked to watch golf on TV, in particularly in the winter,
Oh,
and he would do
yours
that.
too.
He just liked the sea of green, that you would
Yeah,
see all these beautiful golf courses, and it was his little solace from the colorless world out there.
yeah. My dad's a pretty big golf fan too.
Yeah, yeah, he loved it. Those cylinders in there.
Man.
Once again, I'm not doing the grid, but I'm thinking about it.
No, that's a hard one.
It's a little more Spider-Man-y now, right?
Yeah.
Sort of feel like I want to change the head just a bit. Gotta make it delicate, but it's still got to be there. That's the trick. That jawline. We know the ear is going to be up high, high, high. Up the mass on that thigh just a bit. Still too much. More delicate than needed. Yeah, I think I better stop fussing with this one. Get on to the next. Just a bit of a chest line peeking around that deltoid. Just a little. That's it.
Oh crap. Okay.
I'll work the silhouette a little bit there. All right, so we got a little bit of back in there anyway. A seated pose. just like so many standing poses seem to follow the S curve as the weight pulls down on them, a lot of seated poses seem to be built on a C curve. So we'll just see where that takes us. So building up basic mannequin figure core. I'm doing something with it. I'm thinking of the arms coming down and maybe being supported on the knees, but we'll see. But I want to get a feeling of it being made in this moment, and I know that there's a lot of solidity to the skeleton. But I want to treat, because of the incredible flexibility of this area up here around the shoulders, I want to act for a moment as if that mannequin model was made of clay. And I'm pulling the shoulders forward and hollowing out the chest. I haven't really talked a lot about landmarks of the body this time around, but it's great to sort of key in on certain landmarks and position them. And as things change and develop in a pose, you'll be able to sort of keep track of them. All right, Nigel, glad to have had you here. Yeah. Nothing is more rotatable than the shoulder girdle area, what is called the shoulder girdle. I want to pull these arms forward, and I say I'm really sucking in the chest area. I don't want to make much of the chest. I want it to sort of hollow out as I pull all of that forward. You may call that an exaggeration, but it's certainly something that would put some power to the pose. So make sure I get the scale right on this. I don't want to shortchange the legs. I'll see what to do with those forearms. I'm thinking I'm getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, I know we're running overtime all of a sudden. How did that happen? Boy. A little bit. See, now I want to keep it interesting, and so I want to change it up a little bit at the bottoms of the legs, because I don't want them to be like a robot where they just clunk down all perfectly even. So let's just tuck in one underneath the other, I'm thinking. So once again, I'm going to go find my foot, put it where I want it, and find my way back to it. Maybe I can drop this down a little bit lower, let that one tuck in. have a bit more natural feel to it. Do that with it. Now decide what to do with these arms. The knots would run around like about this to the back. Sink the chest in underneath. More foreshortening through this forearm here. Build up the mass of that arm a bit. Sorry for the black thing. Just watch that. It's a big hand again. Maybe a little bit of the bottom of the sole of the foot. That one. Take a little bit of punctuation here at the change up. Oop, there goes another crayon, bites the dust. All right, I'll give him a bit more chest. Probably exaggerate the sunken in thing to make the point originally, but I don't mind if he has a bit more chest to him. And then figure out what I want to do with the hand. But I'm also fighting with this a little bit. I want a bit of overlap of the thigh, and then I want to build a bit more forearm here, and then have a change up at the wrist and drop it down in a kind of a relaxed feel. Like that, I think. Not stepping on that crayon. That line I'm putting there, that line doesn't really exist. But it's a line that I put in as a construction line for me. And it's kind of like building in those center lines and those cross contour lines that we always throw in. I like to put one across the top of the trapezius as it wraps up around and back up into the neck. Call it a crest line. It maps the top edge, the leading edge of that curved form. And I find it's a really useful one to help me visualize where that would be. What you really see would be the indents, probably down here and maybe a bit of furrowing there. And at a certain point, if you've done some rendering, you could get rid of a crest line like that. But it's originally really, really useful because I think of it almost being like a stiff wire that goes around the back that connects the two deltoids. When they bunch up like this, that wire curves. And because it's a tense, stiff wire. And then when you relax the shoulders, you pull them down, they tend to settle down and even out a little bit more. So it's, if you think of them like that, it helps you to remember that when you're bunching up the shoulders around the neck for whatever reason, in whatever pose, you're going to create a little more tension, a little more curve through that area. Think of it as just a memory tool that I can make use of. It may not be useful to you, but it might. So it's worth making. So it's a crest line like that. And I'll just throw it in and then get rid of it later. So that's one kind of seated pose. Trying to keep the legs interesting and not looking too even, working the C curve, building off of that. And once again, you'll notice that I left the head till the absolute bitter end. It just felt right to get everything else in place and then sort out where the head would be quite naturally. That's a method I use more often than not. Any questions at this point? I mean, I know we should be wrapping it up, and we are going to wrap it up, but I just thought I'd like a few minutes where we could be open to a bit of Q&A. I'm going to sit, and I'm going to drop this thing down. It's on a bit of a construct at the moment, so that it would be at the right height for the board. There we go. My famous New York 1960 book. Great book, lots of great black and white images of New York, and really handy as a prop. Perfect. All right. So I think we're probably done with the demoing today, but happy to take a few questions before we all run.
For your workshop that's coming up, can't make it a day. Will that be recorded? Because I'm just not sure about my work schedule.
Yep, understood. Yeah, Paige, absolutely. We're going to record it. And for those who sign up for it, they get the recording. That's very straightforward.
And thank you for spending the extra time with us. I learn a lot better when I see people demoing, and I can say that my figure drawing has improved in just this short amount of time, just watching you do it and break down the foreshortening and the process.
Well, again, we could go on for hours. There's just so many different possibilities and poses and different ways of moving that mannequin around to demonstrate all the different properties that are worth demonstrating. But again, we'll carry on with that other times. That's why they make these things so darn long. Frankly, I'm thinking we're doing a 2-session workshop coming up. My preference would be to do another after that, which would be about 6. I've been arguing with everybody about like a 5 or 6 session workshop. To me, is a nice length. It's not a huge commitment for everybody, but it's enough to get some meat and potatoes going. Which I think would be just a nice balance to discover. Rodrigo, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, about that. Like last week, I got a mail from Kit for an invitation to a workshop, but I don't know if that was like a mistake or something, because it says April 3rd and 5th. So what's up with that?
Yeah, that's probably well. It's supposed to be what we had done. You see that they were trying originally to have me do a workshop in the work week, the March break,
Mhm.
not our school's work week, but the regular March break for all the high school students. They thought it would be good to catch high school students during that time, which makes sense. But
Mhm.
it was a very, very short notice. They came up with this literally 2 or 3 days before March break was starting. And B, they hadn't factored in because they were thinking a Thursday and a Saturday made sense. And
Yeah.
they hadn't factored in the fact that it was Comic-Con on the Saturday and I couldn't do anything. So they ended up just canceling and rescheduling, but they're still looking at the Thursday and Saturday breakdown.
So that's like an extension of our previous workshop, or
Yeah, well, it's basically what we talked about, dynamic figure drawing, and we're going to work. And my hope is that we can push more into various scenarios and just try out various things. I also want to talk about staging. I mean, the closest I got to staging today was that little X trick that I talked
Mhm.
about in terms of the alignment of one figure versus the alignment of another. But I want to talk about cropping, staging, do some examples of how like you might stage something and make it a nice mid-ground thing and keep it all centered and then try exactly the same poses, the exact same scenario with much tighter cropping and keep things off center and have a lot of fun with that. So we can do some before and after of that kind of thing. And I think that would be really useful to do. So I think all of that we're going to do within the
oh,
next
okay.
2 parts.
Yeah, because I saw that everyone in our class, like our last workshop, everyone got that message. So I was wondering if,
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So you guys, I mean, again, it's a good extension. It's a good kind of logical
Okay.
extension of what we were doing already. And so we can just push it further
Awesome.
and push more dynamism into the poses.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Happy to do that. And it was so much fun being on the
So
chalkboard again.
yeah. You're in the big room, right? With the windows.
No, I'm in 507, the corner room,
Yeah, the corner one.
because the
I think
big room has a class today.
Okay.
And what's
Well,
curious is it looks really bright.
yeah.
I'm looking at what Alessandro is saying. Yeah. Yeah, just keep practicing it in that way, and I think it's really gonna help. The more you can just brainwash yourself to think in 3D about all those drawings that you're doing, the better. Because if you can convince yourself of it, you can then your drawings will then convince other people of it, and that's the key. Unless you want a flat relief, in which case, then all of us who have trained ourselves to think in 3D, we have that problem. It's like, oh no, I got to stop doing that. I got to think flat now. I have to think about a relief drawing. But I guess that's a good problem to have. Yeah,
There's
so
a couple
Rodrigo,
questions
what I
in
was
the
going to
chat.
say. Oh yeah,
One from Dominique and one from Kira.
yeah. Kira, how do you get into illustrating comics, especially when you live in Canada? Okay, well, thanks God for the net. But before there was a thing called the net, I can tell you what was interesting was in Toronto in particular, the Toronto Comic-Con and the Toronto Fan Expo, more the Fan Expo. Editors from the big companies tended to come around. We used to come around and they would very quietly look at the work of all the young artists, up and coming artists. They had sometimes they would do formal portfolio reviews, but very often they just came around. I mean, as a Marvel guy, I would recognize, oh my God, there's CB Cebulski. I know that guy. He's walking around with so-and-so Marcos. Oh my gosh, those guys are from Marvel. And they would just, nobody would recognize them. They'd be really low key and they'd be just looking at stuff, which was cool. But really one of the best ways to do it is to get published in a small publishing. Do your own indie work if you can. Work with a few others, create an anthology book, get them printed, get them out there, see if you can get them distributed at least locally. Build that community. And when you show your work, you're not just showing a portfolio of work of like just a bunch of individual shots, but you're showing stories that hold together, that show your ability to tell a story and show continuity. And you're showing work that is printed. And that's always had more cachet to it than just a bunch of individual shots that you did for a portfolio. So this was told to me early on, and it still holds true. Get out there, get your stuff published, even on a small scale, and that's getting you ready for big time. And then after that, it's like you can literally go beat the door down up the offices. And that was what we used to do. I mean, young artists would go to New York. I just wish DC and Marvel were both in New York now, and one of them had to move down to LA, but it was a good way to do it. You just have to be bold.
I'm gonna hold you on that.
Oh yeah, you bet. And the other question was?
I gotta go, but thank you, and been texting. Let's catch up sometime, when you're free. And
you bet.
We'll be seeing.
You got it, Rodrigo.
We'll be seeing each other. So yeah.
And I want to get back to the one other question. Danik was asking about memorizing simple forms of anatomy. And I mean, yeah, you've got to basically do the reps in terms of working anatomy. The good news about anatomy is there's so many good books out there now. There's so much good anatomical instruction at your fingertips. I can't believe how we had to scour for it. In my generation of artists, trying to find little snippets, there were like little gems when you found them. These days, there's so many good books. You get just read the thing online. It's great, but you got to do it. You got to get in there and study the anatomy and study. The best ones are the ones that talk about masses of muscles working as a unit, as opposed to just every individual thread of muscle, so that you get to see sort of the interlocking parts. One of the better ones that I hate to bring up to beginners, but is really good for those who are a little more advanced, are the George Bridgman books, because Bridgman thinks in terms of the muscle masses, builds the interlocking forms, the bigger bulks of 2 or 3 muscles together that work as a unit. And it creates the planes, shows you the basic planes and how it changes the shapes of an arm or a leg. And that to me is invaluable, because of course you've got all those sources where they just strip all the skin off the character and show everything. It's like information overload, and it's really hard to make out how that's going to work with the skin on top of it again. Whereas someone like Bridgman, he works that problem. So you're getting to see how the masses work, how that changes the shapes and planes of the arm from this position to that position to that position. They're really useful. Another one, what's her name? Sarah. I always recommend, because I think of all of the more recent crop of anatomy books, it was one of the better ones. Sarah Simblett, Anatomy for Artists. But then I think it's a matter, as I say, of working shapes. I mean, I will literally sometimes sit there and I'll look at an arm, the silhouette of an arm, and I'll say, okay, nothing more complicated here than the apex of a curve. So if you've got again, as I say, as comic book, as artists, you come to this with a sense of ability to memorize shapes, to shapes imprint on your mind just naturally. This is something that you've done, much to the chagrin of many people around you, of course. But it's what you do. It's how you're wired. So you can look at a thing like this and say, okay, I'm looking at an arm from such and such a position. The thumb would be over here, palm down here. Where's the apex of the curve? Where's the crest of the curve here versus the crest of the curve here? What about a hip here? What about the triceps? What about the biceps? Where are the points of change on that arm? And you map them for yourself and say, okay, I see that this one's higher than that one. That that one's lower than that one. And after look at X number of angles of arms, and you make kind of study of that, then you find yourself just automatically doing that in rotation as you start to build arms from different points of view. Not because you're a whiz on anatomy, but because you've learned the general shapes and you've imprinted them on your brain. One of the areas that's even more useful for that, I find, than the whole body itself, are the hands. There's basic shapes you can cue into for hands that are it's just amazing what you can learn from that. So just build the shape, drop the shape in. I mean, one of my favorites is, okay, you can't see that. It's off the screen now. Kind of a shape like this, maybe followed by something like that. Off it, you can build a thumb. The first finger's back in here. That's the crest of the second. Baby finger would be out somewhere like that. Okay, so you could push that down to about like that. But the whole thing works on shapes. And you can just tap into the shapes and layer them on top of each other, one overlapping the other, and you can create the semblance of perspective very quickly. It can take you in a quick gesture, in a rough sketch, to a good place so fast. It's not funny. And then of course you have to refine, and you have to go in with a little bit more anatomical knowledge to touch things up. But it can put you so far into the process that the rest becomes much easier. It's not the kind of heavy lifting that you would have thought it would have been, or that it might have been when you're using earlier methods. So it's just, I feel like that taps into the strengths of us, because we all tend to be shape oriented. We're wired for it. Let's just face it. Okay, any other questions? Okay, probably about a dozen of them, yeah. Okay, let's just call it a wrap this time around. Please do come back for the workshops that are coming up. We'll just keep them going, and I think look for other workshops with the school over the summer, because our intention, we kind of lapsed on it last year. There were issues around that, but I think we're gearing up for a very robust series of workshops over the summer months this year around. So watch for them. There should be quite a few good ones. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
great
Thanks for
seeing you all
spending
today.
more time with us.
Oh, yeah.
See
My
you.
pleasure. Happy to do it. Okay.
Thanks,
Take
Dave.
care, all.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Thank you. We'll see you again soon. Okay.